We have a very special guest today. The former assistant DPP at Auburn, assistant DPP at Michigan State, scouting assistant for the New York Giants, and dude whose crouch I crashed on in Cincinnati, Cole Brown. Dude, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good, man. Funny you brought up the couch crashing, man. That was some good times. Back in the PFF days, man. Cincinnati would never live there again, but
we've been recording for 30 seconds, and Cole is already destroyed
Cincinnati, cool place, but not a city for me. But getting to know you was awesome, man, and some other guys over at PFF, getting to establish that relationship and lifelong friendships is, it's been nice.
Yeah, man, it was fun. Like getting to know Austin and Evan and
QB1 here.
And dude, Eric, dude. And then Zach. It was a good time. Like I did enjoy the earlier with PFF were a lot of fun with you and it's tough when you left. When you left, it was sad. I was devastated.
You were out there. We were not only coworkers, but we were neighbors. Lived in the same apartment complex. Shout out Avalon at the Point. So we had the weekly, beer and cigar, nights. I miss that stuff, man.
Oh yeah, then I'd come over and kick your ass in Madden and run the same pass play for an entire game.
I don't think that's true, but
it's definitely true.
If you want to spread lies, you can, but I don't.
It's my podcast. Lies are being spread. But then you had a hell of a career bouncing around and you grew up in the game obviously with your dad, and then playing quarterback, playing D1 for a bit before being a generous person you are and sharing the spotlight with others, because we know you had dominated college for 4 straight years and gone on to the pros and played for the Titans. Which, by the way, we'll get to your Titans in a second. They're in a kind of a mess. But kind of walk me through that path a little bit, because was it something you always want to do, or were you kind of following your dad's footsteps, or how did that go for you? What drove you to go from playing quarterback to PFF and then jump around from 2 huge college programs and then the New York Giants, which got a little sign over this side right there.
Go Giants. Man. You kind of hit it on the head. It was with my dad. My dad played in the NFL for 8 years for the Houston Oilers. But since I've been alive, he's been a coach. He coached for the St. Louis Rams back in the glory days, the Kurt Warner days. Was at Kentucky for 9 years as a DB coach for 3, and then the D coordinator for 6. And then at the Titans for 4 years, coaching the DBs out there. And then he finished his career, 4 years at East Tennessee State. And then he actually was just the defensive coordinator for the USFL Michigan Panthers. So tough loss on Saturday, but I've enjoyed following his career. So I kind of grew up around the game. I love football. It's not who I am, but it definitely takes up a lot of my time. I was a high school, all-state quarterback back in the glory days. Still think about those days. Don't judge me, but got to play with guys like Van Jefferson. He was my receiver. Chris Rowland, another one of my he was like a running back / slot receiver who had a short stint for the Atlanta Falcons, and now he's dominating the USFL. So played with some cool guys and got to experience some cool things, and got the opportunity to go play at Chattanooga. Was there for about a year and a half. Had some disagreements with the coaching staff, so I decided, I'm going to go start my career, which I wanted to be in football anywhere I could. So I had the opportunity to actually intern for a semester there in the scouting department, and then kind of took a leap of faith and found PFF and kind of dove into that full steam ahead. I was a part-timer just like you back in the day, just kind of trying to earn my respect among the other 500 part-timers that were there. I was doing school full-time in college, as well as working all night, doing all those processes and analysis and all of that. So I had the opportunity to go full-time, which is kind of where we met. I moved to Cincinnati, and you came there shortly after. Was there for about 6 or 7 months, working in the office doing data and on-air talent, but I talk way too fast, so wasn't great at it. And you were one of the producers, so you have to witness, all my screw ups. But it was a great experience, man. But I missed the competitive aspect of football, which in my opinion, you don't really get from PFF. So I took a leap of faith again and actually joined my dad over at East Tennessee State, man, where I was like a defensive assistant and a recruiting assistant. I was making $9 a day. I was struggling, but it was a great experience getting to work with my dad. Was once in a lifetime experience. Getting our first wins together was awesome. I'll never forget. We played Austin P, and we had no business winning that game, but we did, and it was a great experience. And was there for one season, and then the boss that I interned under at Chattanooga got the director of player personnel role over at Michigan State. He called me out of the blue. Hadn't talked to him in probably a year. It was honestly just a blessing. And went there. Was we call her the defensive player personnel coordinator, but it's just a cheaper title. They could pay me less, with that title. But ran all the defensive side of the ball. Things in terms of recruiting. So find the players, the film cut-ups, helping run the meetings, adjusting the boards, all in every aspect on the defensive side. That was really cool working under Mel Tucker and all those guys. Made a lot of lifelong friends there. And then the New York Giants called me. That was like my dream. For those of you that know me, I am a Titans fan, but getting to work for a team like the New York Giants, the history, the culture, all that aspect of everything that comes with New York was definitely amazing. I got to go up there as a scouting assistant. It was a unique role, though. When I say that, most scouting assistants do all the grunt work. They're doing helping with the advances, making the airport runs, all of that, kind of just, very, entry level things that nobody wants to do. But luckily, I was under Chris Pettit, and then Dave Gettleman was a GM, and they had a specific role, which I was like a college scouting assistant. So I had a lot of leeway, a lot of opportunity to grow, in my role. They gave me 26 schools that I went to on my own, to scout out and get background. I went to 4 All-Star games where I evaluated players, as well as interviewed a bunch of different players. Then I went to 11 pro days, and I ran one over at Stony Brook with a couple other young guys. And then I actually ran DB drills and some offensive skill drills at like Temple, Delaware, Army. So it's really cool to get to do that kind of stuff, man, and kind of just, really for my first year, get to do a lot of things that don't normally happen until year 2, 3 as a scouting assistant, or if you become an area scout, kind of, getting your foot out in the door, like, the very first time when you kind of really don't have that experience. So that was great. Got to be in the draft room, help negotiate to sign an undrafted free agent. He got cut, but still a cool experience. Talk to the agent and all that kind of stuff. But then obviously, as Dave Gettleman, they all got kind of let go. My boss got let go. And with that happening, it kind of just the new regime. I had a great relationship with Joe Shane, Tim McDonald, Brandon Brown, all those guys, but they had their own guys in mind. So, and my contract was up. So it's kind of just what happens. It was unfortunate. It was definitely, it definitely hurt because that was my dream. But then Auburn, came calling and, for the assistant director player personnel role. And, the difference between Auburn and Michigan State was I was on the offense this time. So, it's evaluating all the offensive players, doing similar stuff, but just, again, on the offensive side. And that was an interesting situation at Auburn, and I kind of knew that going into it, but it was definitely a weird year. But after that 6 months, I was like, you know what, it might be time for me to get out now, just because, I had just dealing with a lot of, transition and, instability and moving all the time. It kind of gets old. I still love the game, but it was definitely kind of my time to, get out and just kind of, be more of a fan now and do things like this. So,
yeah, we'll talk more about your career in a minute, but like, I do want to talk about you exiting the game, because you had more success than most, right? Like you been to multiple Power 5 programs in the New York Giants, which some guys never reach, right? Some guys are stuck on Twitter doing Twitter stuff. And I remember when you told me, like, I'm done. When the Auburn regime was changing over, and you and I were talking, actually both know the Auburn DP pretty well, and we like them. I know they would have kept you on staff. Like they liked you, and you said, "Nah, man, I'm done." Like you're one of the few people in the game that had offers to stay, and you walked away on your own, especially at a young age. Like take me through that process of like actually sitting down and deciding that, all right, it's time for something else.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'll be completely honest with you. It was a very hard decision. To say that I, had many sleepless nights and, many just nights where I was just stressed out, didn't know what to do. Because again, it's all I know, right? Like I grew up around it. I've been in it. Like I haven't worked in the real world until now. Like I didn't know what I was good at, what else is out there. But the biggest thing for me is you only live once, right? And I love football, but when you're in football, and a lot of people don't know this, but again, you're working all the time. You don't really have much time at home. I mean, it's just nonstop. I mean, I think Nick Saban had a stat where like 46 of the 52 weeks of the year they're working 7 days a week. I mean, it's a grind. So for me, it was just like, what, and then also it's not stable. Like you could do a great job, but then your GM or somebody gets fired, or the head coach gets fired in college, and then it's like, oh, out of a job. So NFL wise, it's a lot more the quality of life, the work-life balance is a lot better, because again, you do get a lot of the summer off. You're traveling, which really isn't that bad. And I honestly like traveling alone and kind of just like being with myself. I went to Niagara Falls when I was at the Giants, and I went to Buffalo. Going out to dinner by yourself, a lot of things by yourself, and you have to get comfortable being alone. But college, it's nonstop now, 24/7. I would bet if you were to ask 90% of the people in college, they're trying to either get to the NFL or they're like just burnt out. Like it's definitely. And with the NIL, the transfer portal, the way recruiting is now with all the photo shoots and like just nonstop. I mean, it's a lot. And, I just couldn't see myself when I'm 37 years old, if I was in college, like doing that stuff still. And like, it's just like, and the more you go up, the less actually evaluating you do. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what I love to do. But, to kind of make your way up, you get less and less away from that, or more and more away from that. So that's why kind of when I sat back and looked at the big picture, man, I was just like, man, it's time. Again, I've moved 5 years in a row. I've had a lot of great memories, met a lot of great people, man. Have experiences that a lot of people, would love to have. And I definitely, cherish those. But, the regular life isn't too bad either, man. When I'm home by 5:30 every day, I have family time, have time to go do things on the weekend. So I still love football and I'm very, very involved. And but, having a quality of life, man, also matters because you only live once, right? I want to make sure I enjoy my life.
No, and I think that's a really valuable thing that you learned so young, right? Like a lot of guys don't learn that, like the quality of life stuff, until it's too late, right? Until their kids are grown up and now they're 50 years old and they have no family and they're like, well, what the fuck did I do this for? Like, because you're right. Like, the idea of working in football, it is amazing, right? But like,
oh yeah,
it's rarely what you want to do in football, right? Like if you want to be an evaluator, like you're really only evaluating a few positions, right? Like even when you're a scout, you're mostly getting background information.
That's your job is background, 100%.
Yeah. So like you're going to these rinky-dink schools, which by the way, I'm going to ask you to say about some of these schools, but like you're going to these backward schools. I did the same thing when I worked for the Shrine Game. You would go to some great schools, some bad schools, but like you're not really grading these players. Not you're getting some background information, and like when you get to a point where you can actually grade these players, and we're talking years, decades down the line, and then you're right. Once you get to a certain point, when you become like a DPP or a GM, you're not watching film. Like it's a mess. Like you really the area of love that people think about personnel is a really small window in the personnel guy's career, right? So I think it's an interesting thing for people to think about because they hear working in football and they're like, oh, you're just watching film all day. And it's like, if it was, we wouldn't be leaving. we would stay in this forever. But that's not the case.
And I'll say this, in the NFL, it's a lot. Now the NFL is a lot more, pure watching film in that aspect. Like you're right. When you're an area scout, man, or young scout, the way you're judged majority is your background. The ability to get the background and create relationships with pro liaison people on staff. I still did write my players up. I think I wrote up like 200 players when I was there in my first year. But at the end of the day, I don't want to say that my opinion didn't matter. But anyone that the area scouts watching, or the national scout, or the college director, or the assistant GM, or the DPP, or the GM, so at the end of the day, like my opinion or like an area scout's opinion, it does matter, but it's not gonna, they're not gonna make it pick just because, me being the Scotty assistant, like, oh yeah, I love this, or even like a young scout, like you definitely have to pay your dues and earn that, respect. But in terms of college, man, college is where it's really, the higher you go up, the more you're managing, like, with the head coach, like who's coming on campus, and what that, who's the hot prospects, who's not so great, or the game day stuff, making sure the coach talks to these players and that, and like it's just, I remember at Auburn, if we had a game at noon, I'm getting up at 6 a.m. to get to the stadium to get like the stuff for the recruits set up, like just things like that. Like that's not, or driving to the Atlanta airport to pick up recruits, like that's not, what I love to do. And it's part of it, but at the same time, like, the higher you go up, like I was number 2 in command and I still was doing that. And then the higher up you go, again, you're not doing some of the grunt work, but again, it's more of like managing the head coach, making sure he knows everything, making sure that, the head coach is good and up to date with all that kind of stuff. So it's very different in college, but the NFL is still, you definitely have a lot more leeway to watch film, and the DPPs and stuff, they do watch a lot of film. But again, like the NFL, just like my opportunity, like it came and then, like I got let go and it's like, boom, now I'm out. And so it's just kind of a situation that it worked out the way it did. I think if I was still in the NFL, I would still be doing it. Just being transparent, I would probably, still be, giving it a shot. But again, working in the regular world, man, like when I'm working 40 hours a week and make, if you work overtime, you get the overtime pay. And I make more than I did, than I ever did in college or the NFL. And, when I work way less and my quality of life is better. Now, football is still great. But at the same time, man, it's one of those things where, you only can do it for so long until it's like, all right, like I have a family to feed. Like it's just one of those things, in my opinion. But
no, I've always said that, not so much with the NFL, because the NFL is, they're like a properly run business, but
yeah,
a lot of areas of football will use your love of the game against you
100%.
to pay you almost nothing.
Yes.
Like, even when we worked at PFF, you got paid, like I got paid more than you, and you got paid nothing, and I got paid nothing. It's rough. Like, so it's, and yeah, like, when you're young, it's not a big deal, but like as you start getting older, it's like, all right, man, I'm like 27, 28 years old. Like, they're like, my friends working at fast food restaurants are making comparable money at this point. Like what are we doing? And it's not like it's really not for the job that you hate. It's like, it's the pay.
It's the pay
plus the hours, right?
Plus,
it's
right. And again, like, and now obviously, if you're lucky, someone that ends up getting, growing and becoming a national scout, becoming a, DPP or, director, like obviously at that point you're making some pretty good money. But again, that could be 20 years in, just depending on where you're at, right? Like there's no guarantee of that. So, until you really kind of get to that national scout level or higher, you're really not making, compared to the hours you work and what you're putting in and what you're giving up, you're really not making anything close to, what you're sacrificing, until you kind of get up to that level, which not everybody does. And then you could get to the level and then all of a sudden the GM gets fired or somebody gets fired. And then it's like, ooh, now I'm out. Right. So, that's just kind of why I, decided to, at the end of the day, just being in college, I couldn't do it anymore, man. It's different, man.
Yeah. And you're not the first person I know that this happened to. Actually, it's a very common story where, because like it's usually the guys at the bottom that pay the price for a GM getting fired. It's rarely ever like the guys right below them. It's usually the guys who are super young because they're bringing in their own guys. And it's a shame. Like it does suck, and it's nothing you can do about it, right? Like, you did great at Auburn and you did great at the Giants, and it didn't matter. It's stuff outside your control, which I always wanted to be in personnel growing up. And then I got more involved with personnel, and I realized that personnel is a horrible, horrible choice because you have almost no control over your life, right? Like you can be the greatest personnel guy, and it doesn't matter. If your coach goes out there and sucks, like, well, what are you gonna do? But I do have some New York Giants fans listen to this podcast, so I'm gonna ask about Dave Gettleman real quick.
Okay.
What was your opinion of Dave?
Oh, I love Mr. G. So again, he gave me the opportunity that I've been wanting all my life. He was awesome to me, super nice. I know he has this media image or whatever, and I'm not going to get too much into it. But to me personally, he was great. He always talked to me every day. He actually called me last July, just checking in, seeing how I was doing. And I hadn't seen him obviously since, he retired in January. So it had been about 6 months. He gave me a call and just checked in on me, So I really like him a lot. I owe him a lot. So I'll defend him forever. I know people can talk about certain picks or whatever, but to me, I judge people off of how they are as a person, and he was great to me. So I have no complaints at all.
I'm happy you say that because one of my first contacts in football was Dave Gettleman. I got when he was with the Panthers, I got referred to him, and I was a nobody. Like I was less than a few months into the game at that point, and he took the time to reach out to me and help me get an interview with the Panthers. And I ended up not getting it, but this is a GM of an NFL team taking time to email this kid who's not a son of or an uncle or a nephew of anybody.
Yeah.
And he was. I always will defend Dave Gettleman for that as well. Regardless of how I feel about certain picks or whatever. But I will say for Dave, I never thought he was a bad talent evaluator. I may disagree with how he where he chose players or how he did contracts, but there was rarely ever a time where Dave Gettleman picked a player or selected a player that wasn't good.
Mm-hmm.
He usually was on the money with that stuff and he was respected around the league as a good talent evaluator, so it showed. But I'm happy to hear that he treated you well. That's good to know.
Again, there's more to it than just the GM, right? There's, there could be a head coach, right, that wants certain players, and sometimes the GM will do, what the head coach wants. There's definitely different situations out there. So before you judge, Dave Gettleman, just remember there's, not saying that every pick was certain this or that, but at the same time, not everything is just solely on one person. So that's just my thoughts.
I agree with you. Going into your years with the New York Giants and going to those 26 schools, what was the most ridiculous thing you saw, or what was a school where you were like, oh boy, you don't have to give me a name if you want to just give me the experience. I have a feeling it's the same school that I also went to, but it's a bit of a mess.
Okay, I'll start with one story. There was once, because obviously me being a young guy, a lot of my schools only had, my big schools were Connecticut, Rutgers, Temple, and that's really it. They were my big schools. So majority of my schools, man, were 1AA, D2, D3. So they were smaller schools. I know one school, I went to a game and, the press box was it was a high school press box. They had no snacks or food for anybody. I had to go wait in line, I was watching the game as a fan, at halftime to get some food. So I've had some interesting stories, and I'm not going to name any names or any schools, but I had one, pro liaison, you could say, at a school that was trying to sell his players like they were for sure NFL stars at a 1AA D2 school, right? So it's you know what I mean? It's what are we doing here? And they were they had won 2 games that year. So it's you're trying to tell me there's 5 players here that are NFL guys, but you have 2 wins in the FCS or I don't remember if it was FCS or D2, but I'm just come on. So there's definitely a lot of things like that where these smaller schools, people will try to sell their guys. Now I had the opportunity, I went to school and got to scout out a guy named Julius Chestnut at Sacred Heart. And that, great kid. I believed in him. And I really believed in him. I gave him a draftable grade. He ended up going to the Titans as a UDFA. And actually initial, 53-man roster. So I was happy for him. And there's some guys like Isaiah Pacheco, I got to evaluate him. And, I think I had a 6-round grade on him, which was pretty high at the time. And, he ended up being, a good player. And because a lot of things with him was the old line at Rutgers was terrible. But the same player he was now, or he is now, he was in college. He had a bad line, a terrible line, in college. So I had some cool players like, Travis Jones over at UConn, who was a very controversial player. Getting to meet him, talk to him, scout him out, things like that. So I had a lot of cool experiences, but at the same time, I would say 90% of my, the guys that I watched were, at best, UDFAs, at absolute best. But it was so cool to really get to see, all right, this is what an NFL player, because you can tell when you're watching a lot of not good players or, not good enough for the NFL, and then you watch one that is, it's cool to kind of be okay, this is what NFL players should look like when you're going back, because it's easy when you're watching, some small school and you see some player like balling out, you're like, okay, this guy's pretty good. But then like when you put it in perspective, it's like, would he go up to Penn State and start? Probably not. So it's like if he can't even start at Penn State, how is he going to play in the league? So it's like you definitely have to, put your blinders on and remember like, all right, like this kid is playing against, D2 players. So let's like make sure that it's like, legit. But it was cool, man. I had a lot of good experiences and it was a fun year. I'll say.
So I'm happy you said that about, when you're looking at these players, like there are some good players that you see like, well, how is he compared to like, a Penn State, right? Because I think this gets lost a lot of time when we talk about players in the NFL where it's like, like Daniel Jones is the big one, right? People, whatever, and when Chris has Daniel Jones, it's like, well, why you don't think he's good? It's like, no, man, he's one of the best. He's one of the top 32 players in the world at quarterback, right? Just like, but compared to Patrick Mahomes, he's not good, right? It's like it's really who you're comparing him to, right? It's like it's and that's the NFL game. It's like all these guys who have a chance to make it, anyone that gets signed to a mini camp are some of the best athletes in the world. You're not comparing them to the rest of the world, comparing them to the guys who make the 53-man roster, make the 48-man active roster. Like it's a much harder and more elite cast of people. And I feel like that gets lost a lot with regular fans.
Yeah, and again, if you're playing Division I football and you're playing like you're a good, like when it comes to football, like in general, you're a good player. But when it comes to comparing to the league or making it to the league, it's just a different level, right? So, I would never say anyone's a bad player, just like, but at the same time, like, he's just not a NFL player, right? Which is not a bad thing. Like, that's why there's the USFL, the XFL, like there's Canadian Football League, like there's still plenty of avenues of like professional football. But when you're talking about the NFL, and that's the best of the best, like, it's not a knock if you're not as good as, Derrick Henry or some, elite running back. But at the same time, like, you're just, so not everybody, can be an NFL player. That's kind of what it is.
Right. Two more things for you. The first was I also had an experience where like I went to a school and there was nothing there. Like there was like I asked where the food was and they handed me a bag of like baked potato chips. I'm like, great, that's not what I meant. But I think the most disappointing one, and I'm going to call them out by name. I went to the Georgia Tech UNC game back when AK was there as a DPP of Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
I went on a Saturday, right? So D1 schools like that they give out halfway decent food, right? So I'm like, what was that?
They said you're definitely enjoying your time.
Exactly. So, I'm sitting in Mercedes-Benz because it was one of the games in Atlanta. I'm like, definitely getting Chick-fil-A. It's a Saturday. It's one of the few days that Chick-fil-A is open in the stadium, and they give us chicken, but not Chick-fil-A. Dude, I've been holding on to that for years. I got into work with Thomas Dimitroff a lot, the former Falcons GM.
Yeah.
And I told Thomas, I'm like, dude, I don't know who runs this at the stadium, but you need to pass along this complaint. I've been holding on to this. It's a fat man complaint about how I was really hoping for Chick-fil-A and I didn't get it. But I want to wrap up real quick. I've taken enough of your time.
That's good, man.
Your Tennessee Titans.
Yeah.
They go out and they get Will Levis this year. There seems like there's a pretty big range between analysts of where they're putting the Titans. Some think they're still going to have to win in the South, and there are some who think they're going to be in the top of the draft next year. How confident do you feel in this team right now?
In winning the division, I'm very confident.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, come on. Like, let's be honest here. All right, let's go. The Texans rebuild. Like, they're not going to be, they're going to be better, but they're not going to come in from winning 2 games to, being a playoff team in 1 year with, I know they got a great quarterback, but still a rookie. The Colts, again, Richardson, great talent, but he's extremely raw. He's going to need time. He's going to need reps. So I think they're going to be good down the line. But this year, I still think with, the Titans with, Tannehill, Henry, you're getting Traylon Burks in year 2, Chig in year 2, Phillips, I forgot his first name, but Kyle Phillips, receiver in year 2. You're happy we're coming back probably with the top 10 defense, if everybody's healthy. Harold Landry's coming back. Kevin Byard's an all-pro. Jeffrey Simmons is a Pro Bowler. Danico Autry, again, a very underrated player. You're getting Christian Fulton, and then you're also getting the other corner. I keep forgetting his name, but the old boy from Auburn. But he's going into year 2. Roger McCreary, that's his name.
Mm-hmm.
So again, they have a really good and pretty young defense. I think if they go out and sign DeAndre Hopkins, at that point you have a pretty competitive offense as well. Not saying they're going to be like the number one offense in the league or anything, but their only competition in the South really is the Jags, in my opinion. And again, it's the Jags. Like they've been good like 2 years out of the last 12, right? Like I'm not going to go ahead. I'm not going to hype the Jags right now and say they're going to be great, right? Like let's just be honest. Like they could be and they should be, but it's the Jags. So now, in terms of like a Super Bowl run or anything like that, I don't think that. I think that window's over. I think 2 years ago was their last chance at that. So I think it's going to be a rebuild after this year. But I think they'll have one more shot at winning the South, and competing, for in the playoffs. But again, I don't see them beating, the Chiefs and the Bills and the Jets potentially. Like a lot of those really, really good teams, in the playoffs. I just with what they have. And again, they've proven they can't do it, right? Like they should have back in, I think it was 2021 or 2020, but they were the number one seed, and lost to the Bengals. It's just things like that. They lost to the Ravens when they should have won 2 years or in 2020, and then in 2021 the number one seed. And they had a terrible offensive performance, and lost a game where they sacked Joe Burrow like 7 times or something like that. And they still lost, right? Like because of like the quarterback play. So I don't see, as everybody's getting older, I don't see it getting better. But I do think they'll win the South. I'm pretty confident in that. Again, I think the window for other teams to catch up is coming because again, the Jags have a great quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, and then the Colts and the Texans just drafted some good quarterbacks. So, there's still time for them to get better. But to go from a rookie quarterback to going from like one of the worst teams to like a top 10 team, like it's how often does that happen? Let's just be honest. You know what I mean? So
rare. I will say though, I am much lower on the Titans than you are, but that's
you always are.
I always am. Yeah. I'm releasing my thing on the AFC South. Probably next week or maybe later this week. Honestly, I'm putting the whole South together because both NFC and AFC Souths are kind of crap. So we're gonna put that pod together. But I will say I have them below 6 wins.
Yeah, you probably have them last.
Not last. The Rams still exist.
Yeah.
Dude, the Rams are so bad. Which now.
Well, I was talking about the AFC South. I was like,
yeah. And then the South, yes, yeah, I have them last in the South.
That's crazy. Like I'll put money on that one. That's no. There's no.
You want to do a gentleman's bet? 1 beer?
Yeah, as long as everyone stays healthy, I'll take that bet. Now, if like Tannehill goes down,
that's not fair. But Tannehill, honestly, I would say even if Tannehill goes down, I'm not or stays healthy. I'm not sure it's going to matter.
No, I think again, everyone hates Tannehill, but I'll sit here and say, yes, his pass wasn't great, but his time with the Titans, he's been in a very above average quarterback. He's been competing. He's beaten pretty much every single top team in the league during the regular season. In 2020, he had that great run. I know obviously they came short of the Chiefs, but still had a great run then. And they were the number one seed 2 years later. They've been in the playoffs, I think, 3 of the 4 years he's been the starter. So I mean, you got to give him some credit. It's still, I get it, but.
I'm not going to dunk on him. Like, he had some great years with Tennessee where he was arguably a top 10 quarterback a few times.
Yeah.
I just think that run is over. And I think you can kind of tell that the personal department also thinks it started to run out, and they wouldn't have drafted Will Levis where they did if they thought Tannehill still had a few more years left. And I think this roster is the weakest roster, especially the weakest offense he's had in his time in Tennessee. That O-line is in the middle of a rebuild. And I'm nervous about what that's going to happen, what it's going to be for them, right? Their receiving core is not the same as it used to be. Not saying it can't be good, right? I do like Kyle Phillips. I do like Traylon Burks, but AJ Brown was proven, right? But honestly, now Derrick Henry's still good, right? No, but we don't know how injury prone he's going to be. The running back depth is not what it used to be either. Like it's definitely one of the weaker offenses in terms of what they've had in the past, and I do worry how that's going to affect Tannehill as he starts kind of going on this downslope at the end of his career.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I'll agree with you on that. Especially with the receiving core, it's definitely one of the worst in the league, if not the worst overall. Just, now there's some potential there, but again, it's proven at any level at their best receivers, Traylon Burks, who's again had a decent rookie year, but it's not proven, right? So that's why I think the Hopkins signing, I think that is a must for them. And then if there's a couple of vets that get cut, during training camp, like a Corey Davis, right? If he gets cut from the Jets, I know there was a report that he won't get cut, but you never know. Like that would be a great re-sign. Like I know, he left and he kind of was, a little bit frustrated that they never offered him a contract, but he would come in and be the Titans probably like number one option right now, or
easily, yeah.
It's like. They're still that is scary. Like if they don't get Hopkins, I think I will kind of walk back a little bit and be like, you know what, probably not going to win the South, just because again, that if Traylon Burks goes down, like they have nothing at receiver. I mean, it's like they have like a bunch of unproven young guys, and then again, they can't just run the ball, every single snap. It's just not what it is. You can't do that. So, but if Hopkins gets signed, Traylon Burks stays healthy, that's a pretty good 1-2. Kyle Phillips in the slot, Chig at tight end's a very good young, he's kind of like a Johnny Smith type of guy. And then obviously you have Derrick Henry, who's going to be,
the king, man.
Yeah, he's the king. And then they signed or they drafted Tajay. I think I'm saying his name right, Tajay Spears. I know his knee is whatever, but he's still a pretty dynamic player with the ball in his hand. So, he might shock some people if he can stay healthy. As in both the run and pass game. So, I think there's a lot of things, a lot of under the radar pieces. But you're right. Like compared to the Colts, receiving core, like Josh Downs is one of my favorite players in the draft last year. Like I personally know him and his father. His father was actually my boss at East Tennessee State. So I've been
awesome.
High school, man, and he's going to be a very good pro. So there's a lot of the Colts, the Jags, even probably the Texans have a better receiving core right now than the Titans. So, but again, scary. There's still time to add pieces and see how things shake up. So I think with Hopkins, that would definitely make them probably. I mean, I think with Hopkins, that you can argue they're one of the better offenses in the AFC South if they get Hopkins. I know he's older, but in my opinion, like Hopkins is still going to be a good player. He's still going to be, even when he's not open, he's open with his ball skills and his catch radius and, all of that. So, but I mean, I see your point though.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. There's a lot of potential there, and I do see it. We'll see how Landry bounces back. We'll see if these receivers can live up to their draft potential. I had Kyle Phillips at the Shrine game. I got to see him just torch defenses when he was there. We'll see if that. Actually, I had Kyle Phillips as a long shot to lead the league in lead the rookies in yards as a receiver. Wow. Obviously, that didn't happen, but yeah. I was like, maybe. Like if anyone's going to be a long shot, it might as well be him. So I do like some of the players, but I am very nervous about them. But Cole, I appreciate it, dude, coming on and spending some time. You're always welcome back on. One of my boys. So I appreciate that. And I'm happy you're having fun and you're enjoying the life post football. It's great seeing you, dude.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate it. And who knows, man, I might need to open up a podcast myself or start a podcast because, like I said, I still miss football. It's not who I am, but it definitely was a huge part of my life. So, I'll have to talk with you about how I can, start a podcast and get going because I know a lot of things, a lot of inside things, and that could be definitely very interesting. So, definitely be, something I'm thinking about.
Listen, if you do that, I will fly down to where you are and I will stay on your couch and we can record a podcast down there on your couch.
Like the old days.
Exactly. But hopefully you have a better couch than you had when you were in Cincinnati.
It's worse. Yeah. Actually, when I left Jersey, I didn't want to walk that couch down the stairs of my four floor like apartment complex. So I just sold it. I was like, whoever roomed after me, I just said, hey, you want this couch for $100? Like I was like, I can't. Like that was the worst experience of my life trying to get furniture up a no elevator 4-story apartment complex in New Jersey. That was definitely
that's brutal. But dude, thank you so much, man.
Absolutely, man.